Elena Torres wiped the sweat from her forehead and adjusted her position behind the massive rifle. The Barrett 50 caliber was not a light weapon. It weighed more than 30 pounds when loaded, and it kicked like a mule when fired. But Elena loved it. She had spent years learning how to handle this monster of a gun, and now it felt like an old friend. The sun was setting over the Marine Corps base, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Elena had been at the shooting range since 6 in the morning. It was now past 7 in the evening. Her body ached, her shoulders were sore, and her ears rang despite the heavy-duty ear protection she wore. But she was not done yet. She had 3 more targets to hit before she could call it a day. She took a deep breath and looked through the scope. The target was 1,200 yards away. That was more than 2/3 of a mile. At that distance, the target looked like a tiny dot. Most people could not even see it with their naked eyes. But through her scope, Elena could see it clearly. She calculated the wind speed, the temperature, and the slight downward angle of her shot. Her mind worked like a computer, processing all the information in seconds. She squeezed the trigger slowly and steadily. The rifle roared and kicked back against her shoulder. A second later, the radio on the table next to her crackled. "Hit dead center," Elena smiled. That was what she liked to hear. Sergeant Elena Torres was 26 years old and already famous in the Marine Corps. She had joined the military right after high school, looking for purpose and direction in life. Her father had been a Marine, and so had her grandfather. Military service was in her blood. But Elena had not joined just to follow family tradition. She had joined because she wanted to prove something to herself and to the world. When she first told her recruiter that she wanted to work with heavy weapons, he had laughed. Not in a mean way, but in a way that said he did not think she understood what she was asking for. Heavy weapons required strength, stamina, and a certain kind of toughness. At 5 feet 5 inches and 130 pounds, Elena did not look like someone who could handle a 50 caliber rifle. But looks could be fooling. During basic training, Elena had shocked everyone. She was not the fastest runner or the strongest soldier, but when it came to shooting, she was in a class by herself. Her instructors noticed it right away. She had steady hands, perfect vision, and an almost supernatural ability to stay calm under pressure. When other recruits were shaking with nerves, Elena was cool as ice. When others rushed their shots, Elena took her time and hit the target every single time. After basic training, Elena went to advanced marksmanship school. That was where she first met the Barrett 50 caliber rifle. The instructor had placed the huge weapon on the table and looked at the class. "This is not a toy," he had said. "This rifle can hit targets from over a mile away. It can punch through concrete walls and disable vehicles. It requires respect, discipline, and skill. Most of you will never be good enough to use it in combat." Elena had stared at that rifle and felt something click inside her. She wanted to master that weapon. She wanted to be one of the few who could use it in combat. From that day forward, she dedicated herself to learning everything about the Barrett 50 caliber. She studied its mechanics, practiced loading and unloading it until she could do it blindfolded, and spent countless hours on the range. Her hard work paid off. After 2 years, she became certified as a 50 caliber specialist. After 4 years, she was one of the top marksmen in her unit. After 6 years, she had a reputation that spread throughout the entire Marine Corps. Officers from other units requested her for special assignments. Other Marines came to her for advice and training. She had become exactly what she set out to be, one of the best. But being the best came with challenges. Elena had faced doubt and skepticism her entire career. Some of it came from people who genuinely worried about her safety. The military was dangerous and combat roles were especially risky. Those people meant well, even if their concern was sometimes annoying. But other doubt came from a darker place. It came from people who simply did not believe women belonged in combat roles. People who thought women were too weak, too emotional, or too fragile to handle the stress of war. Elena had deployed twice to combat zones. During her first deployment, she had provided cover fire for infantry units moving through hostile territory. Her shots had taken out enemy fighters before they could ambush her fellow Marines. She had saved lives. During her second deployment, she had spent 3 months in a forward operating base, pulling security duty and running patrol missions. She had seen combat up close and she had performed her duty with honor. But no matter how many successful missions she completed, there were always doubters. Men who whispered that she only got promoted because the military needed to fill diversity quotas. Officers who questioned whether she was really as good as her scores suggested. Other service members who made jokes about women and weapons, thinking she could not hear them or would not care. Elena cared. Of course she cared. But she had learned long ago that the best response to doubt was not anger or argument. The best response was performance. Let her work speak for itself. Let her targets tell the story. Every hit was an answer to every doubt. Every perfect score was proof that she belonged. Now, as she packed up her equipment for the day, Elena thought about the upcoming competition. The annual inter-service marksmanship competition at Quantico was 3 weeks away. It was the biggest shooting competition in the military. Teams from all branches of service competed: Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Marines. The best shooters in the country would be there. And this year, Elena had been selected to represent the Marines. It was a huge honor. It was also a huge responsibility. Elena would be one of only 3 women competing in the entire event. She would be the only woman shooting in the heavy weapons category. That meant every eye would be on her. Every shot would be judged not just as Elena's performance, but as proof of whether women could compete at the highest levels. The pressure would have crushed some people. But Elena thrived under pressure. She had spent her entire career proving people wrong. She had turned doubt into fuel and skepticism into motivation. This competition would be no different. She would go to Quantico, she would shoot her best, and she would let the targets tell the truth. As she walked back to the barracks, her rifle case slung over her shoulder, Elena ran into Captain Rodriguez. He was her commanding officer and one of her biggest supporters. Rodriguez had fought to get Elena selected for the competition team. He believed in her abilities and was not afraid to say so publicly. "Torres," he called out, "how was practice today?" "Good, sir," Elena replied. 50 shots, 48 hits at extended range. I am working on consistency in high wind conditions. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That is what I like to hear. You know, there will be a lot of brass at Quantico, right? Generals, admirals, the works. They will all be watching. I know, sir. Does that bother you? Elena thought about the question for a moment. Then she smiled. No, sir. Let them watch. They will see what a Marine can do. Rodriguez laughed. That is the right attitude. Get some rest tonight. You have earned it. As Elena continued to her quarters, she thought about what lay ahead. The competition would be tough. The other shooters would be incredibly skilled. The conditions might be difficult. But Elena was ready. She had been preparing for this her whole career. What she did not know and could not have predicted was that the real challenge would not come from the other competitors. The real challenge would come from an admiral who did not think she belonged there at all. An admiral who would try to put her in her place. An admiral who would learn a very important lesson about respect, but that was still 3 weeks away. Tonight, Elena would clean her rifle, review her training notes, and get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow, she would be back on the range at 6 in the morning doing what she did best. Shooting, hitting targets. Proving that she belonged among the best of the best. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle sat in its case next to her bunk. In the dim light of the barracks, it looked like just another piece of military equipment, but to Elena it was much more than that. It was her tool, her partner, and her voice. When words failed to convince people of her abilities, that rifle spoke for her. And it spoke loud and clear. The morning of the competition arrived with perfect weather. The sky was clear and blue without a single cloud. The air was cool but not cold, around 60 degrees. There was a gentle breeze from the east, steady and predictable. For a shooter, these were ideal conditions. Elena could not have asked for better. She arrived at the Quantico shooting range 2 hours before the official start time. She always came early. It gave her time to inspect her equipment, check her rifle, and get mentally prepared. The range was already busy with other competitors setting up their gear. Elena recognized some faces from previous competitions. Others were new to her. Everyone moved with the quiet confidence of professionals who knew their craft. Elena found her assigned shooting position and began unpacking. First came the rifle case. She opened it carefully and lifted out the Barrett .50 caliber. Even after years of handling it, she still felt a sense of respect when she held this weapon. It was a tool of precision and power. She began her inspection routine, checking every part of the rifle to make sure everything was in perfect working order. As she worked, she noticed people arriving in the observation area behind the firing line. Civilians were not allowed, but military officers and officials could watch. Some came to scout talent for special assignments. Others came to support their service branch. A few came just because they loved marksmanship and wanted to see the best shooters in action. Among the arriving officials was Rear Admiral Charles Hendrickson. Elena did not know him personally, but she knew of him. Most people in the military did. Hendrickson had been in the Navy for over 30 years. He had commanded ships, led operations, and earned numerous medals. But he was also known for something else, his old-fashioned views about women in the military. Years ago, Hendrickson had given an interview to a military magazine. In that interview, he had said that women did not belong in combat roles. He said they lacked the physical strength, the emotional stability, and the killer instinct needed for real combat. His words had caused a huge controversy. Women's rights groups protested. Many military leaders criticized him. For a while, it looked like his career might be over, but Hendrickson had powerful friends. He apologized publicly, saying his words had been taken out of context. He went through sensitivity training. He learned what he could and could not say in public. His career survived. He even got promoted to Admiral. But everyone knew that his public apology did not mean his private beliefs had changed. He still thought what he thought. He just knew better than to say it out loud anymore. Now he was here, at Quantico, serving as one of the judges for the competition. Elena saw him standing with a group of other senior officers, a coffee cup in his hand. He was a tall man, probably in his late 50s, with gray hair and a stern face. He looked like someone who was used to being obeyed without question. Elena turned her attention back to her rifle. She did not care what some admiral thought about women in combat. She was here to shoot, not to prove anything to anyone. Well, that was not completely true. Every time she competed, she was proving something. But she was proving it to herself first and to everyone else second. The practice session began at 8 in the morning. Each competitor got 30 minutes to fire practice rounds and adjust their equipment. This was not scored. It was just a chance to get comfortable with the range conditions and make sure everything was working properly. When Elena's turn came, she took her position behind her rifle. She loaded a magazine, chambered a round, and settled into her shooting stance. Through her scope, she could see the first target. It was 1,000 yards away, a steel plate about 12 inches in diameter. For a .50 caliber rifle, this was a reasonable shot. Not easy, but not extremely difficult either. She controlled her breathing and found her natural pause between heartbeats. That was when she squeezed the trigger. The rifle boomed, the sound echoing across the range. The recoil pushed back against her shoulder, but her body position absorbed it easily. A second later, she heard the distinctive clang of bullet hitting steel. Perfect hit. She fired 9 more practice rounds, 9 more hits. Every single shot landed exactly where she aimed. Around her, she could hear other shooters firing their weapons. Some hit their targets, some missed. But Elena's consistency was drawing attention. Other competitors glanced her way. Officials in the observation area pointed at her position and spoke to each other. Admiral Hendrickson was watching too. Elena could feel his eyes on her, though she did not look back at him. She did not need to see his face to know what he was thinking. He was probably telling himself that she was just getting lucky, or that practice rounds did not count, or that she would crack under pressure when the real competition started. The practice session ended. Elena cleared her rifle and began making small adjustments to her scope. The wind had been steady during practice, but wind could change. She wanted to be ready for any conditions. As she worked, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. She looked up and saw Admiral Hendrickson walking toward her position. His aide, a young Navy lieutenant, followed a step behind him. Elena stood up and came to attention. Regardless of what she thought about the man personally, he was a senior officer and deserved the proper military courtesy. "At ease, Sergeant," Hendrickson said. His voice was deep and carried an edge of authority that came from decades of command. That was some good shooting during practice. "Thank you, sir," Elena replied. She kept her voice neutral and professional. The Admiral walked closer and looked at her rifle. Barrett M82. Fine weapon. Heavy, though. Do you find it difficult to handle? Elena knew what he was really asking. He wanted to know if she struggled with the rifle's weight. It was a backhanded way of questioning whether she was strong enough for this role. No, sir, she said. With proper technique and training, the weapon is manageable. Hendrickson made a non-committal sound. He circled around to look at her scope setup. Then he did something that shocked Elena and everyone else nearby. Without our asking permission, he reached out and put his hand on her rifle. Let me show you something, Sergeant, he said. At these distances, you need to adjust your scope differently. Here, let me demonstrate. He started to lift the rifle from its position. That was when Elena's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Her grip was firm and strong. Years of handling heavy weapons had given her powerful hands and forearms. The Admiral tried to pull his hand back, but Elena's grip held him in place. Sir, she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Respectfully, hands off my rifle. The entire range seemed to go quiet. Other competitors stopped what they were doing and turned to look. Officials in the observation area leaned forward to see what was happening. Even the range safety officers paused and watched. Admiral Hendrickson's face turned red. He pulled harder, trying to free his wrist from Elena's grip, but she held firm. She was not hurting him, but she was not letting go either. For a few seconds that felt like an eternity. They stood there in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Elena released his wrist. The Admiral stepped back quickly, rubbing his wrist where she had held it. His expression was a mixture of shock, anger, and embarrassment. No one had challenged him like this in years, certainly not a junior enlisted soldier, and definitely not a woman. That is quite a grip you have there, Sergeant, he said. His voice was tight, barely controlled. He was trying to sound casual, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. I hope your shooting is as strong as your assertiveness. Elena stood at attention and did not respond. She had said what she needed to say. Now she would let her shooting do the rest of the talking. The Admiral looked around at all the people watching. He was clearly aware that this moment would be talked about. People would remember that a sergeant had grabbed his wrist and stopped him from touching her weapon. He needed to salvage his dignity somehow. That was when he got an idea. You know what, Sergeant Torres, he said, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. Let us make this interesting. I am impressed by your practice shooting. So let me offer you a challenge. Elena felt a warning bell go off in her mind. This was not going to be good, but she could not refuse a direct challenge from an admiral, especially not in front of so many witnesses. What kind of challenge, sir? She asked. Hendrickson smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. The next stage of this competition involves 6 targets at varying distances, 600 yards to 1,200 yards, all different sizes. You have to hit them consecutively, one after another, within a strict time limit. It is one of the hardest courses we have. Elena knew the course he was describing. It was usually saved for the final round of the competition. It was designed to test not just accuracy, but also speed and the ability to rapidly adjust for different distances. Even experienced shooters sometimes fail to hit all 6 targets. If you can hit all 6 targets consecutively, the Admiral continued, I will personally write a commendation for your file. I will recommend you for advanced training opportunities. It will be very good for your career. That sounded generous on the surface. But Elena understood what was really happening. The Admiral was setting a trap. He was giving her a challenge that was extremely difficult, hoping she would fail. When she missed even one target, Elena looked directly at Admiral Hendrickson. The range was still quiet, with everyone watching and waiting to see what she would do. The Admiral stood there with his arms crossed, his face showing a mixture of satisfaction and challenge. He thought he had trapped her. He thought she had no choice but to accept his challenge and then fail publicly. But Elena had learned something important during her years in the Marines. When someone tried to corner you, the best response was not to fight your way out. The best response was to turn their trap into your opportunity. If the Admiral wanted to make this into a public test, then fine. She would pass that test, and she would make sure everyone remembered it. I accept your challenge, sir, Elena said clearly. Her voice was calm and steady. But I have a question first. What happens if I succeed? The Admiral blinked. He had not expected that question. In his mind, failure was the only possible outcome. I already told you, Sergeant. I will write a commendation for your file and recommend you for advanced training. Yes, sir, I heard that part, Elena replied. But that is just doing something nice for me. What I am asking is different. If I hit all 6 targets consecutively, will you acknowledge that you were wrong about women in combat roles? The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone on the range understood what Elena had just done. She had turned this from a simple shooting challenge into something much bigger. She had made it about the Admiral's public statements from years ago. The statements he had apologized for but never really taken back. The beliefs he still held but kept quiet about. Hendrickson's face darkened. His jaw clenched. Behind him, his aide looked extremely uncomfortable, like he wanted to be anywhere else but there. Other officers in the observation area whispered to each other. This was getting serious. Sergeant, I do not think my personal views on policy matters are relevant to a shooting competition, the Admiral said stiffly. With respect, sir, you made them relevant when you challenged me, Elena responded. You are not just testing my shooting skills. You are testing whether women belong in combat roles. So if I prove I belong, you should be willing to say so publicly. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward again, this time looking worried. Torres, maybe we should discuss this privately before. Elena held up her hand respectfully. Thank you, sir, but I know what I'm doing. Rodriguez stopped talking, though he did not look happy. He knew his Marine was right, but he also knew this could backfire badly. If Elena failed now, it would not just be her failure. It would be seen as proof that women could not handle the pressure of combat roles. The Admiral looked around at all the watching faces. Other competitors had gathered closer, drawn by the confrontation. Officials and observers crowded the observation area. Someone had probably started recording on their phone. This moment was going to spread beyond the range, beyond Quantico, probably beyond the military itself. Social media would pick it up. News outlets might run stories. Whatever happened next would be very public. Hendrickson was trapped by his own challenge. If he backed down now, he would look weak. People would say a sergeant had scared off an admiral. His reputation would never recover. But if he agreed to Elena's terms and she succeeded, he would have to publicly admit he had been wrong. His pride would take a hit either way. Finally, he spoke. Fine, Sergeant Torres. If you hit all 6 targets consecutively, within the time limit, I will publicly acknowledge that I may have underestimated the capabilities of women in military service. Is that acceptable? Elena noticed he had changed the wording slightly. He was not saying he was wrong exactly, just that he may have underestimated. It was a typical political hedge, a way to apologize without really apologizing. But it was enough. Once he said those words publicly, people would interpret them as an admission of error regardless of how carefully he phrased it. That is acceptable, sir, Elena said. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Hendrickson replied coldly. You still have to actually make the shots. And, Sergeant, I should warn you that in my 30 years of military service, I have seen many confident people fail when the pressure was on. Confidence is not the same as capability. I understand, sir, but I have also learned something in my years of service. The best way to respond to doubt is with performance. So let us see what happens. The range officer approached, looking confused about what was going on. Admiral Hendrickson explained the challenge, and the range officer nodded slowly. All right, we can set this up. Give me 15 minutes to position the targets and get the range ready. As the range officer walked away to make preparations, the observation area began filling up even more. Word was spreading fast about what was happening. More officers arrived. Competitors who had finished their practice sessions came over to watch. Even some of the range support staff found reasons to be nearby. Everyone wanted to see this. Elena walked back to her rifle and began her mental preparation. She blocked out the crowd, the whispers, the pressure. This was just another day on the range. Just another set of targets to hit. The fact that an admiral was watching, that her reputation was on the line, that women everywhere might be judged based on her performance right now. None of that mattered. What mattered was the rifle, the targets, and the fundamentals of good shooting. Captain Rodriguez came over and knelt down next to her. Torres, you do not have to do this, he said quietly. We can file a complaint about the Admiral's behavior. He had no right to touch your weapon without permission. We can get you out of this situation. I appreciate that, sir, but no, Elena replied. He wants to see me fail. I am going to disappoint him. You know what will happen if you miss even one target, right? The Admiral will use it as proof that he was right all along. And not just about you, about every woman trying to serve in combat roles. I know, sir. That is why I am not going to miss. Rodriguez studied her face for a moment. Then he smiled slightly. You know what? I believe you. Show them what Marines can do. The range officer returned with his clipboard. All right, Sergeant Torres, here is the course setup. 6 targets at the following distances. 600 yards, 750 yards, 900 yards, 1,000 yards, 1,100 yards, and 1,200 yards. The target sizes decrease with distance. The 600-yard target is 12 inches. The 1,200-yard target is only 4 inches in diameter. Elena did some quick math in her head. A 4-inch target at 1,200 yards, that was like trying to hit a baseball from more than 2/3 of a mile away, with wind, with pressure, with hundreds of people watching. It was not impossible, but it was extremely difficult. You have 10 minutes total to complete all 6 shots, the range officer continued. You can take your time on each shot, but if you run out of time before completing all 6, it counts as a failure. Do you understand the parameters? Yes, sir, I understand. The current wind speed is 5 knots from the east. Temperature is 62 degrees. Humidity is 40%. Are you ready to begin? Elena took one last deep breath. Yes, sir. I am ready. The range officer spoke into his radio, confirming with the downrange spotters that they were in position. Then he looked at Elena. When you hear the buzzer, you may begin. Your time starts then. Good luck, Sergeant. Elena settled into position behind her rifle. She had fired this weapon thousands of times. She knew its weight, its balance, its personality. Every rifle was slightly different with its own little quirks. This one pulled just a tiny bit to the right. She knew that and compensated for it automatically. The trigger had a 4-pound pull weight. She knew exactly how much pressure to apply. The scope was zeroed perfectly. She had checked it 3 times that morning. The crowd behind her had gone completely silent. Even the breeze seemed to pause, as if nature itself wanted to see what would happen. Elena closed her eyes for just a moment and visualized the shots. She saw herself firing, saw the bullets traveling downrange, saw them striking the targets one after another. Visualization was a tool she had learned from Olympic shooters. If you could see success in your mind, your body would follow. The buzzer sounded, sharp and loud. Time started. Elena opened her eyes and looked through her scope at the first target. 600 yards, 12-inch steel plate. She could see it clearly. This was the easiest shot of the 6. Do not overthink it. Just execute, she chambered a round. The action of the Barrett made its distinctive sound, a sound that any experienced shooter would recognize immediately. She adjusted her body position slightly, getting everything perfectly aligned. Her left hand supported the rifle. Her right hand rested on the grip, finger on the trigger. Her cheek pressed against the stock. Her breathing slowed. Behind her, Admiral Hendrickson watched with his arms crossed. His face showed confidence. He truly believed she would fail. He had probably already planned what he would say afterward. Something about how he respected her courage for trying. But this proved his point about women lacking the capability for precision combat roles. He was already thinking about how this would vindicate his old statements. He had no idea what was about to happen. He had challenged the wrong Marine on the wrong day with the wrong weapon. Elena Torres was about to teach him a lesson he would never forget. Elena looked through the scope at the first target. 600 yards away, 12 inches in diameter. The steel plate gleamed in the morning sunlight. For a shooter of her skill level, this was a routine shot. But there was nothing routine about the situation. Hundreds of people were watching. An admiral was waiting for her to fail. The reputation of women in combat roles hung on her performance. She pushed all those thoughts away. There was only the target, the rifle, and the wind. She felt the breeze on her face, steady from the east at about 5 knots. She had already calculated the wind correction in her head. She adjusted her aim point slightly to the left to compensate. Her breathing slowed. In, out. In, out. She found the natural pause between breaths. That moment of perfect stillness when the body is most steady. Her finger increased pressure on the trigger. Slow and smooth. No jerking. No rushing. The trigger broke cleanly. The Barrett roared. The sound was massive, like thunder. The rifle kicked back against her shoulder, but her body position absorbed the recoil. The muzzle blast kicked up dust around her position. For a moment that felt frozen in time. Everyone waited. Then they heard it. The distinctive clang of a bullet hitting steel. The sound carried across the range clearly. The downrange spotter's voice came over the radio. "Target 1 hit. Center mass." A ripple went through the crowd. Some people nodded as if they had expected it. Others looked surprised. Elena did not react at all. She was already thinking about target 2. 1 shot down. 5 to go. She worked the action of the Barrett, ejecting the spent brass casing. It arced through the air and landed with a metallic tink on the ground beside her. She loaded another round and closed the bolt. The second target was 750 yards away. Still a 12-inch plate, but the extra distance meant more wind drift and more bullet drop. Elena made her scope adjustments. A few clicks for elevation, slightly more wind correction. She settled back into position. Her mind was completely focused now. The crowd, the Admiral, the pressure, all of it faded away. There was only the shot. She controlled her breathing again. Found the pause. Squeezed the trigger. The rifle boomed. Another massive sound that echoed across the range. Elena rode the recoil and immediately looked through her scope to spot her impact. The sound of bullet on steel rang out. Target 2 hit. Center mass 2 down, 4 to go. Elena was breathing easily, staying relaxed. Tension was the enemy of accuracy. Tight muscles made for jerky movements. She kept her body loose and her mind clear. She ejected the second casing and loaded the third round. Target 3 was 900 yards away. This was where things started getting challenging. At 900 yards, every small error was magnified. A tiny mistake in wind reading could cause a miss. A small flinch could throw the shot off. The target was still 12 inches, but it looked much smaller through the scope at this distance. Elena checked the wind flags downrange. The wind was still steady, but she thought it might have increased slightly. Maybe 6 knots now instead of 5. She made her adjustments. She also noticed that her heart rate had increased just a bit, not from fear or nerves, but from the physical exertion and adrenaline. She took an extra moment to let it settle. Behind her, she could hear someone in the crowd whisper, "2 hits is good, but the next ones are harder." This is where people usually start missing. Elena ignored it. Other people's doubt was just noise. It did not matter. She found her breathing rhythm again. The crosshairs settled on the target. She increased pressure on the trigger, smooth and steady. The rifle fired. Through her scope, she saw the slight shimmer of the bullet's path through the air. Then she heard the impact. Target 3 hit. Center mass, 3 down, 3 to go. The crowd was getting more excited now. People were starting to realize they might be witnessing something special. Even the other competitors who had been skeptical at first were paying close attention. Good shooting was good shooting, regardless of who was doing it. Elena worked the bolt and loaded the 4th round. The 4th target was 1,000 yards away, and this was where the difficulty jumped significantly. The target was smaller now, only 8 inches in diameter. At 1,000 yards, that target looked tiny through the scope. It was like trying to hit a dinner plate from more than half a mile away. She made her calculations. More elevation adjustment. More wind correction. The wind was definitely at 6 knots now, maybe slightly more. She factored in the temperature and humidity. She thought about the slight rightward pull of this particular rifle. All these factors went into her final aim point. 1,000 yards was a distance where even experienced shooters sometimes struggled. The bullet would be in the air for about 2 seconds. A lot could happen in 2 seconds. A gust of wind could push it off course. The slightest error in aim could result in a complete miss. This was where technique and training really mattered. Elena settled into her shooting position. She made sure every part of her body was aligned correctly. Her left hand supported the rifle firmly but not too tightly. Her right hand gripped the stock with just enough pressure. Her cheek was welded to the cheek piece. Her breathing was controlled and steady. Admiral Hendrickson had uncrossed his arms. He was leaning forward slightly now, watching intently. Despite himself, he was getting drawn into the performance. 3 perfect hits in a row was impressive, regardless of who was shooting. But he was still expecting her to miss eventually. 4 hits would be good, but 6 consecutive hits? That was extremely difficult. He still thought failure was inevitable. Elena found her breathing pause. The crosshairs were steady on the target. She began applying pressure to the trigger, smooth, steady, no rushing. The shot broke perfectly. The rifle boomed and kicked. The bullet flew downrange. The wait felt longer this time. At 1,000 yards, it took a bit more time for sound to travel back. Then they heard it. The clang of steel, target 4 hit, slightly left of center, still well within the scoring zone. 4 down, 2 to go. The crowd was getting louder now. People were starting to talk excitedly. Some were pulling out phones to record video. Captain Rodriguez was standing at the edge of the observation area with a huge smile on his face. He had never doubted his Marine, and now she was proving why. Elena ejected the 4th casing and loaded the 5th round. Her shoulder was starting to feel the repeated impacts of the .50 caliber's recoil, but it was nothing she could not handle. She had fired hundreds of rounds in single training sessions before. 6 shots was nothing physically. The challenge was purely mental and technical. The 5th target was 1,100 yards away. The target size had shrunk to just 6 inches in diameter. At that distance, through the scope, it looked like a small coin. The margin for error was getting very thin. A miss here would be understandable. Even the best shooters in the world sometimes missed at 1,100 yards, but Elena had not come this far to miss now. She ran through her calculations again. More elevation, more wind correction. She was also now accounting for the Earth's rotation, something that mattered at these extreme distances. The Coriolis effect was tiny, but at 1,100 yards, tiny things added up. She adjusted her scope and settled into position. Her body knew what to do. This was muscle memory built through thousands of repetitions. Her breathing was automatic now. Her trigger press was instinctive. She was not thinking about the mechanics anymore. She was just shooting. The rifle fired. The crowd held its breath. Time seemed to slow down. The bullet traveled through the air, affected by wind, gravity, and physics. It flew true, clang, steel on steel. Beautiful music to a shooter's ears. Target 5 hit. Dead center. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. People were standing up in the observation area. Other competitors were shaking their heads in amazement. 5 shots, 5 hits at distances ranging from 600 to 1,100 yards. This was world-class shooting. This was the kind of performance that people talked about for years afterward. But Elena was not done yet. 1 target remained. The 6th and final target. The hardest shot of them all. She ejected the 5th casing and picked up her last round. Her hands were steady as she loaded it into the chamber. She closed the bolt with a firm push. This was it. Everything came down to this final shot. The 6th target was 1,200 yards away. More than 2/3 of a mile. The target was only 4 inches in diameter. At that distance, it was barely visible even through her scope. It was like trying to hit a baseball from 13 football fields away, with wind, with hundreds of people watching, with an admiral waiting to judge her. The time limit was also becoming a factor. She had used about 7 minutes so far. She had 3 minutes left. That was plenty of time for 1 shot, but she could not afford to waste any. She needed to work efficiently. Elena made her final adjustments to the scope. Maximum elevation for the distance, significant wind correction. She factored in everything she knew about this rifle, this ammunition, these conditions. She built a complete picture in her mind of where the bullet needed to go and how to make it go there. The crowd behind her was completely silent now. Everyone understood the difficulty of what they were watching. Admiral Hendrickson stood frozen, his face showing a mixture of emotions, disbelief, concern, and perhaps, just maybe, a tiny bit of respect. The cheering continued for several minutes. Elena stood by her rifle, accepting handshakes and congratulations from the other competitors. A sergeant from the army slapped her on the back and said, "That was the best shooting I have seen in 20 years. An Air Force captain asked if she would be willing to share some training tips later. Even the range officers, who were supposed to remain neutral and professional, were smiling and nodding with approval. But through all the celebration, one person remained still and silent. Admiral Hendrickson stood in the observation area, his face unreadable. His aide stood next to him, looking extremely uncomfortable and unsure of what to do. Everyone else was celebrating, but the Admiral just stared at the distant targets, as if he could not quite believe what he had just witnessed. Captain Rodriguez made his way through the crowd to Elena's position. He was grinning from ear to ear. "Torres, that was outstanding. I have never seen anyone shoot that well under that kind of pressure. You made the Corps proud today." "Thank you, sir," Elena replied. She was pleased with her performance, but she was also aware that the situation was not fully resolved. The Admiral had made a promise in front of all these witnesses. Now everyone was waiting to see if he would keep that promise. The crowd began to quiet down as people realized that the real moment of truth was still coming. The shooting was done, but the challenge had included a condition. If Elena hit all 6 targets, the Admiral was supposed to publicly acknowledge that he had been wrong about women in combat roles. Everyone wanted to see if he would actually do it. Admiral Hendrickson seemed to realize that he could not put this off any longer. He took a deep breath and began walking toward Elena's shooting position. The crowd parted to let him through. His aide followed, looking like he wished he could be anywhere else. The Admiral's face was stern and controlled, but Elena could see the internal struggle he was going through. His pride was battling with his sense of honor. He reached Elena's position and stopped a few feet away. Elena came to attention and saluted. For a long moment, the Admiral did not return the salute. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then finally he raised his hand and returned the salute properly. "Sergeant Torres," he said. His voice was quiet but carried across the now silent range. "That was exceptional shooting. 6 targets, 6 hits at distances ranging from 600 to 1,200 yards, under significant pressure, with a weapon that many people consider too heavy for your—" He paused as if choosing his words carefully. "For someone of your build." Elena did not respond. She just waited. This was the Admiral's moment. She had done her part. Now it was time to see if he would do his. Hendrickson looked around at all the watching faces. He saw other admirals and generals. He saw junior officers and enlisted personnel. He saw competitors from other service branches. He knew that whatever he said next would be recorded, shared, and remembered. This moment would follow him for the rest of his career. "I came to this competition today with certain beliefs," he continued. "Beliefs that I have held for a long time. Beliefs about physical capabilities, about suitability for combat roles, and about who belongs on the front lines of military service." He paused again. Elena could see the struggle on his face. This was not easy for him. Admitting you were wrong was never easy, especially for someone who had spent decades in positions of authority. "You have demonstrated today, quite decisively, that those beliefs were incorrect," Hendrickson said. The words came out slowly, as if each one required effort. "I made judgments about capability based on gender rather than on actual performance. I assumed limitations that did not exist. That was wrong of me." The silence on the range was complete. People were hanging on every word. Some were recording on their phones, knowing this moment would go viral on social media. The Admiral's aide looked shocked. He probably had never heard his boss admit to being wrong about anything. "The Marine Corps is fortunate to have you, Sergeant Torres," Hendrickson continued, "and I was wrong to doubt that. You have my apology. You have also earned my respect, which is not easily given." He extended his hand. Elena shook it firmly. The Admiral's handshake was strong, and this time when he felt the strength in her grip, his expression changed slightly. Maybe he was beginning to understand that strength came in different forms. "Thank you, Admiral," Elena said. "Respectfully, sir, I was not shooting for your approval today. I was shooting to represent my Corps, and to honor all the service members who deserve to be judged on their skills and performance, not on their gender or any other characteristic. But I do appreciate your acknowledgement." Several people in the crowd started clapping. Then more joined in. Soon everyone was applauding, not just for Elena's shooting, but for the entire exchange they had just witnessed. This was bigger than one competition or one challenge. This was about changing attitudes that had existed for generations. The Admiral nodded stiffly and stepped back. He had done what he promised to do. His pride was wounded, but his honor was intact. He had learned something today, even if it was a painful lesson. As he walked back toward the observation area, his aide hurried to keep up. Elena heard the aide say quietly, "Sir, that was a brave thing you just did." The Admiral did not respond, but he did not need to. Everyone knew it had taken courage to admit he was wrong in front of so many witnesses. The rest of the competition continued, but Elena's performance was the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. Her story spread quickly. By that afternoon, videos of her shooting were circulating on military social media. By evening, news outlets were picking up the story. Marine Sergeant crushes Admiral's grip and his doubts read one headline. 6 shots, 6 hits, one powerful message read another. The story resonated with people far beyond the military. Women in male-dominated fields saw it as inspiration. Young girls interested in military service saw it as proof that they belonged. Even people who had never touched a gun appreciated the story's message about judging people on their capabilities rather than on stereotypes. 3 days after the competition, Elena received a formal commendation in her file, just as the Admiral had promised. But she also received something else, an invitation to become an instructor at the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School. This was a prestigious assignment, typically reserved only for the very best marksmen in the Corps. Elena accepted immediately. Her first day as an instructor, she arrived to find a class of 20 students waiting for her, 19 men and 1 woman. The female student looked nervous, probably wondering if she would be treated fairly or would face the same kind of doubt and skepticism that had plagued women in combat roles for years. Elena introduced herself to the class. "My name is Sergeant Torres. I am here to teach you advanced marksmanship with heavy weapons. Some of you may have heard about the competition at Quantico a few weeks ago. Some of you may have seen the videos. I am not here to talk about that. I am here to teach you how to shoot." She walked along the line of students, making eye contact with each one. "In this course, I do not care if you are male or female. I do not care what your background is or where you came from. I care about 3 things: your willingness to learn, your dedication to mastering your craft, and your ability to hit targets. If you have those 3 things, you will succeed here. If you do not, you will not. It is that simple." She stopped in front of the female student. "What is your name?" "Private Collins, Sergeant," the woman replied, standing at attention. "Collins, have you ever fired a Barrett M82? "No, Sergeant. But I am eager to learn." Elena smiled slightly. "Good answer. Eagerness to learn is more important than prior experience. By the end of this course, you will know that weapon inside and out. You will be able to hit targets at extreme distances. You will be confident in your abilities. I guarantee it." Private Collins' face lit up with a mixture of relief and determination. Elena saw in the young private the same fire that had driven her own career. The desire to prove herself. The willingness to work harder than everyone else. The refusal to accept limitations that others tried to impose. Over the following weeks, Elena proved to be an excellent instructor. She was demanding but fair. She pushed her students hard but gave them the tools they needed to succeed. She shared not just the technical knowledge of shooting, but also the mental discipline required to perform under pressure. Her students, including Private Collins, thrived under her instruction. Admiral Hendrickson, for his part, kept his word in more ways than one. He not only wrote the promised commendation, but also became a quieter advocate for equality in military service. He did not make grand speeches or public declarations, but in meetings with other senior officers, he began questioning assumptions about who could or could not do certain jobs. When other admirals expressed doubt about women in combat roles, he would say quietly, "I used to think the same way. Then I met a Marine sergeant who taught me better." 6 months after the competition, Elena received a package in the mail. Inside was a handwritten note from Admiral Hendrickson. It was brief and to the point, very much in keeping with his personality. "Sergeant Torres, I recently recommended 3 female sailors for advanced training in weapons systems. 2 years ago, I would not have done that.